Raymond Johnson had everything a man could want. Money, the kind that never ran out, no matter how hard he tried to spend it. His net worth had so many zeros that even his accountants needed a minute. Power CEOs flew across oceans just to shake his hand. Legacy,
Evening.
the
Good to
Johnson
see you.
name was carved into the skyline of 3 cities.
Good to see you all.
He didn't walk into rooms, he owned them. But there was one thing that none of it could replace. One absence that followed him into every boardroom, every penthouse, every glass of 30-year scotch poured at midnight. 8 months ago, his wife was simply gone. No argument, no warning, just a 4-line note on the kitchen counter and silence so loud it nearly broke him. Gloria hadn't just left. She'd disappeared like the universe had reached down and erased her. And no amount of money, no private investigator, no favor called in from powerful men in dark suits had ever brought her back. He had almost convinced himself to stop looking. Almost. Welcome to our story. Before we continue, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in London, New York, Jamaica, maybe South Africa or Canada? We'd love to hear from you. Tonight, Raymond was closing the biggest deal of his career, a $50 billion acquisition that would make his empire untouchable. The venue was Aurelius, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. A place where senators whispered secrets and billionaires sealed fates over Wagyu and Bordeaux. He wasn't thinking about Gloria when he walked through those doors. He never thought he'd have to. But the moment he stepped inside, past the crystal chandeliers and the polished marble floors that gleamed like frozen water, something stopped him cold. Not a sound, not a face he recognized. A silhouette. A woman near table 14, her back to him, leaning over a surface with both hands pressed flat against it, as if she needed the table just to hold herself upright. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, tired bun. Her dark uniform was clean but stretched taut across a belly that hadn't been there 8 months ago. A belly. Raymond's chest turned to concrete. She turned, slowly, like someone who had learned not to move too fast, and for one electric, devastating second, their eyes met across the entire length of the room. The deal didn't matter anymore. The $2 billion didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the fact that Gloria Johnson, his Gloria, was standing in front of him, exhausted, pregnant, and wearing a name tag. And she was looking at him like she wished he were a stranger. What happened to her? What was she hiding? And whose fault was it really that she ended up here? Keep watching, this story is just getting started. The town car arrived at Aurelius at precisely 8 o'clock. Raymond had timed it that way on purpose, late enough to make his guests wait, early enough to remind them he was still in control. He stepped out without hurrying, he never hurried. The night air was sharp and cold, but Raymond barely felt it. He had trained himself, over years of hostile boardrooms and harder losses, to feel very little on the outside. It was a gift, his mother once told him. A Johnson family inheritance more valuable than the stock portfolio. Tonight that coldness was his armor, and he wore it well. His associate Marcus fell into step beside him. Delacroix's team is already inside, 3 of them. They flew in from Geneva this morning, which means they're hungry to close. Good, Raymond said, hungry men make mistakes. The doorman pulled the entrance open without being asked. Inside, Aurelius exhaled wealth, warm light pooling across ivory tablecloths, the low murmur of powerful conversations, crystal glasses catching the glow of chandeliers like captured stars. The maitre d' appeared instantly, all practiced deference and careful smiles. Mr. Johnson, an honor as always, your guests are waiting. Raymond didn't respond. He simply moved forward, buttoning his jacket once, a small, deliberate gesture that said I own this moment without a single word. He was Raymond Johnson. He closed deals, he built empires. He did not feel things in public. At least that was still true for the next 4 minutes. Gloria had been on her feet for 6 hours. She knew because her ankles told her so, a deep, throbbing ache that started somewhere around the 4th hour and never really left. The baby had been restless all evening, pressing against her ribs like a small fist demanding space she didn't have to give. She'd learned not to wince in front of customers. Wincing led to questions, and questions led to pity, and pity didn't pay her electricity bill. Martinez, her supervisor's voice cut through the kitchen noise. Table 14 just seated, VIP party, 3 courses, full service, don't make me regret putting you on tonight. She didn't answer, She just nodded, smoothed her apron with both hands and pushed through the kitchen doors. The dining room hit her the way it always did, the warmth, the light, the quiet symphony of people spending money they'd never miss. She kept her eyes low and her posture steady as she approached the table, pulling her notepad from her apron pocket. "Good evening, gentlemen, my name is..." She looked up, and the world simply stopped. He was already staring at her, had probably been staring since she walked out of the kitchen. Raymond stood motionless among his seated guests, one hand still resting on the back of his chair, his face stripped completely of the cold, composed mask she'd once spent 3 years studying. He looked like a man who had just watched the ground disappear beneath his feet. And Gloria, God help her, felt her hands go still. She recovered first. That was the thing about surviving on your own for 8 months, you learn to swallow shock like water. Gloria broke eye contact, dropped her gaze back to her notepad and breathed through her nose once slowly. "Can I start you gentlemen with something to drink?" Her voice was steady, she was proud of that. Raymond said nothing. One of his guests, a lean, silver-haired man with a Geneva accent and impatient eyes, answered for the table. She wrote without looking up, nodded once and turned toward the service station. That was her mistake, turning too fast. The dizziness came without warning, the way it always did, a sudden tilt in the room's axis, her center of gravity betraying her. Her hip caught the edge of the service cart. The tray tipped. 3 crystal water glasses hit the marble floor in a cascade of sound that silenced the nearest tables. The cold water spread across the floor like an accusation. For a moment nobody moved. Gloria stood gripping the cart's edge with both hands, her head down, the baby pressing hard against her ribs, her eyes burning with a humiliation she absolutely refused to release. Then the laughter came. Low, quiet, the kind of laughter men use when they want deniability. The silver-haired guest leaned toward his colleague. "Remarkable," he murmured in French, not bothering to lower his voice. "They'll really hire anyone these days." The other man smiled behind his glass. Raymond's jaw tightened to stone. Raymond was on his feet before he made the decision to stand. "Excuse me," the words came out quiet, final, the tone he used to end conversations, not pause them. Delacroix's team looked up, surprised. Marcus shot him a warning glance that said $2 billion, Raymond. Raymond didn't look back. He crossed the dining room in long, measured strides, following the kitchen doors still swinging in Gloria's wake. A young busboy stepped into his path and immediately stepped out of it. Raymond pushed through the doors. The kitchen swallowed him whole, heat, noise, the clatter of plates and shouted orders. A sous chef started to object. One look from Raymond silenced him. She was at the far end, near the staff corridor, her back against the wall, eyes closed, one hand pressed flat against her belly. Just breathing. Just trying to get through the next 10 seconds before the next 10 seconds arrived. Raymond stopped. He had imagined finding Gloria 1,000 times in 8 months. In those imaginings, she was always okay. Always somewhere soft and safe, choosing distance for reasons he told himself he could eventually understand. He had not imagined this. Her uniform was wrinkled at the hem, slightly faded from too many washes. Her service shoes were worn at the outer soles, the kind of worn that came from months, not weeks. There was a small ink stain on her apron pocket. Her bun was coming loose, one dark curl pressed flat against her temple. She looked exhausted down to her bones. Gloria. Her eyes opened. She pushed off the wall immediately, spine straightening, chin lifting, the posture of a woman who had decided, at some point in the last 8 months, that she would never let him see her break. "You need to go back to your table, Raymond." "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't have a choice here, this is my workplace." "Gloria," his voice dropped to something low and stripped of everything corporate. "You're pregnant." The word landed between them like something heavy. She looked away, jaw tight. "Go back to your deal. It was mine to lose 8 months ago when you disappeared without." "I disappeared," she turned back to him and something behind her eyes finally cracked open. Not tears, something harder than tears. "Your mother came to our apartment, Raymond, 3 days after you left for Singapore. She sat at my kitchen table and told me exactly what I was worth to your family." Gloria's voice was controlled, but her hands were trembling. She had documents, a severance agreement, $200,000 to sign away my rights and relocate within 72 hours. She said if I refused, her breath caught, steadied, that the pregnancy would become a liability that the Johnson family had resources to manage. The kitchen noise continued around them, indifferent. Raymond felt something cold move through his chest that had nothing to do with temperature. "She threatened you." "She promised me." Gloria's eyes finally met his fully, "and I believed her because she said you already knew." The silence between them was its own kind of verdict. Raymond heard it, "She said you already knew," and felt it move through him like a blade finding the exact space between his ribs. 8 months. She had spent 8 months believing he had signed off on her removal, that he had sat in Singapore, closed his deals, and let his mother write a check to make his wife disappear. And the worst part, the part that was already gutting him, was that he understood why she believed it. He had always let his family move pieces around him without looking closely enough at the board. His perfection had been built on willful blindness, and she had paid the price. "I didn't know." The words felt inadequate before they even left his mouth. "Gloria, I swear to you, I came home from Singapore and you were gone. I looked for you for months." She studied him with eyes that had learned, the hard way, to measure sincerity carefully. "It doesn't change where I am, Raymond." "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." He exhaled slowly, scrubbing one hand across his jaw. The billionaire, the titan, the man who never asked for anything, visibly undone, right here under fluorescent kitchen lights. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you for one thing." She waited. "Let me take you to a doctor." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "Please, just that, nothing else." She didn't say yes immediately. That was what he would remember later, that she made him wait, even then. She stood in that kitchen corridor with flour dust on the floor and the smell of garlic and hot metal in the air, and she looked at him for a long moment with eyes that were doing careful, private calculations he wasn't entitled to see. Then she untied her apron. Raymond had his phone out before the apron strings hit the counter. One call, 3 words, bring the car around, and it was done. He shrugged his jacket off and settled it across her shoulders without asking permission. She didn't argue. That alone told him how tired she truly was. He didn't take her to Mercy General. He didn't take her anywhere his name was on a building, a wing, or a donor plaque. Instead, he called in a private arrangement, a discreet medical facility in a quiet part of the city, the kind of place that handled sensitive cases for people who couldn't afford to be seen. He registered her under the name Gloria Reeves, paid in a transfer that would take an army of accountants to trace back. His mother had people everywhere. He knew that now in a way he couldn't unknow. The attending physician met them within minutes, professional and unhurried. Raymond stayed close but said little, watching Gloria settle onto the examination table, still straight-backed, still guarded, while a machine found the steady, rhythmic drumbeat of his child's heartbeat. He stood very still and listened. The screen was small and grey and grainy. Raymond had sat across from presidents. He had watched markets collapse in real time on screens worth more than most people's homes. He had absorbed news, good and catastrophic. With the same measured stillness his father had drilled into him before he could drive. Nothing had prepared him for this. The technician moved the instrument slowly and the image shifted, and there in the static and shadow a shape resolved itself into something undeniable. A profile, a forehead, a tiny curled fist pressed against a cheek as though the child were already deep in thought. Raymond's hand found the edge of the bed railing and held it. "Healthy weight," the technician said quietly. "Strong heartbeat, you have a boy, Ms. Reeves." Gloria made a small sound beside him, something soft and private that she turned her face away to finish. Raymond didn't look, he gave her that. He was looking at his son. And something was happening inside his chest that he had no corporate language for, a rearrangement, deep and structural, like a building shifting on its foundation. Not crumbling, resettling, finding a new center of gravity around something that weighed less than 2 pounds and had never once breathed open air. By the time they turned off the machine, Raymond had already made 3 decisions. He was removing his mother from the family trust. He was calling his attorney at midnight. And whatever war his board wanted to bring, over scandal, over Gloria, over the heir they'd tried to erase, he would win it. 3 months later, the Johnson family held an emergency board meeting. Raymond didn't attend. He sent his attorney instead with a folder thick enough to end arguments, restructured trust documents, revised succession terms, and a restraining order against his mother that had been quietly approved by a judge 2 weeks prior. There was nothing left to debate. He had moved first, moved fast, and moved without mercy. It was by any measure the most efficient acquisition of his career. He spent that morning somewhere better. The penthouse had been redecorated in the months since Gloria moved in, not extravagantly, but warmly. There were throw blankets on the couches now, a small bookshelf near the window, a baby monitor on the kitchen counter, though it wouldn't be needed for another few weeks. The place finally felt like something other than a monument to his own success. Gloria was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window when he found her, one hand resting on her belly, the city spread beneath her like something they jointly owned. She was wearing his sweater. She had stopped apologizing for that around week 6. She looked like herself again, rested, unhurried, glowing in the particular way that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with safety. Raymond stood beside her and said nothing for a moment. He had built towers with his name on them. He had moved billions across continents before breakfast. But standing here, in the quiet warmth of a life finally honest enough to deserve, this was the only empire that had ever felt real. He reached over and took her hand. She let him.